episode 41 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we've got 30 some days left until the election. Amazing, isn't it, Keith?
It is. You know, when we started this a year ago, Mike, the election seemed like, far away and forever. People are actually voting now at other places in the country.
Right.
The ballots are going to hit here in California probably over the weekend. And the election's real and happening right now.
Amazing. All right. This week it was the VP debates. And I'll just say this. Yawn.
I don't know if they covered a lot of new ground, but wasn't it refreshing to see finally two guys having a civil conversation, talking about the issues, being complimentary, being interested in each other's families, not being jerks for the most part, and actually giving the American people something to think about, something to remind them of what politics used to be like in this country. Of course, this was an opportunity for both of them to do a little repair work. And J.D. Vance, people say, what did you do with the body of J.D. Vance? Who was that guy? He really came out and I think did himself some good. In the polls afterwards, favorability ratings on Vance went from minus 22 to plus 14. And for Walz, who for the most part got his butt kicked big time in the debate,
right,
his went from minus 3 to plus 34. He did an even better improvement.
Wow.
So despite the fact that Walz had an off night, both of the candidates improved their perception with the American people.
I say yawn. I'm sort of joking because you're right. It was a real civil presentation, and that's something we haven't seen in ages in any debate. And for democracy, that's a good thing. For entertainment value, it was a yawner.
I'll grant you that, except for the memes of Walz when he looked into the camera and had that look like, he may have had a bad fart. It was not a good look. So there were those kinds of moments, but for the most part, it was cordial, it was polite, it was policy focused, there were some exaggerations on both sides in terms of facts, but generally speaking, it was to the point, and a credit to both of them.
And Walz, his biggest fumble, which wasn't a real big issue to me, but he really fumbled the ball when they asked him about his China visit. He couldn't even dance around it. So to me, that was his worst moment. Would you agree?
It was. I mean, he really should have been prepared for that. It's one of these things where they tell you never admit you made a mistake. Simply sort of said, yeah, I misspoke about the dates, but I was there right after Tiananmen Square. I learned a lot because of being there in the aftermath and working with the Chinese, yada, yada, yada. And moved on to something else, but he didn't.
See, that's why people should hire Keith Curry to prepare people for debates. He's got it down.
It's always easy after you watched him.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Vance punted the January 6th question, right?
He did. And speaking of people going through backflips to avoid saying anything, what we saw there was J.D. Vance paying the cost of Donald Trump, because he was perhaps the most highly visible and the most known of the person who's had to go on TV and say something that is pathetic, that compromises his credibility and his integrity and his honesty, and makes everybody go, what's with this guy? But, he's not the first. Every week on Sunday shows, there's 3 Republican talking heads on the various networks who get asked questions about something Donald Trump said that week or the January 6th thing. And they go through various iterations of trying to justify it and sacrifice their own credibility, their own careers, their own integrity, trying to placate Donald Trump. The person who has been the most pathetic and the most compromised doing this has been Tim Scott. But until Republicans decide that they're going to tell the truth about the election and move on, that's a question that's going to be run over in sound bites. And consider this. If that moment had not happened, the entire story about the debate would be whether or not Tim Walz was qualified to be president of the United States, whether he could if he can't stand up to J.D. Vance, can he stand up to Putin? Can he stand up to Mitch McConnell? And instead, that gave him a lifesaver. And most of the major media, most of the liberal media, all focused on Vance failing to say that he would certify the election and that Biden won. And that became the story. And it stepped on all of the good that could have come out of that could have been exploited by Trump.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was the feel I got as well. But it's over now. We're done with debates, right?
Tomorrow the sun will come up and Donald Trump could have a new opinion. So we will see. But that's all that we have scheduled. I will say this, however, I'm not sure that J.D. Vance is going to really get off the hot seat because he actually outperformed Trump so well that Trump just pisses him off. Trump hates that when somebody performs better than he does. And in fact, during the middle of the first hour of the debate, when Vance was doing his best, Trump was actually tweeting about Pete Rose.
Yeah.
So he was, trying somehow to take people's minds off the fact that his vice president was performing much better than he was.
But the debates are over. Where does the campaign move now? As someone who's been through campaigns, what stage are we in?
We're still in a trench warfare stage. The numbers really haven't moved. If anything, they're all getting closer in all of the battleground states. Now, I'm inclined to say that I'm thinking Kamala Harris is going to buy space on milk cartons because she has been missing from any major interview after she had her little foot massage with MSNBC, and Stephanie Ruhle basically answered the questions for her if she possibly could. But she hasn't closed the sale yet. She's going to go on 60 Minutes, which apparently every presidential candidate in the past 50 years has done. 60 Minutes is not known for being a softball interview situation. It was where the Clintons salvaged their campaign with Hillary and Bill together in the aftermath of Jennifer Flowers before the New Hampshire primary. So it's really an opportunity for her to make the sale or to, significantly flub and give people a lot of concern about whether she's up for the job or not. Donald Trump's campaign has made the decision that he will not participate in a 60 Minutes debate. And I actually think this is the right decision for both campaigns. Trump is much more likely to blow himself up and make a mistake and say something stupid because he simply lacks the discipline and can't help himself. So he is probably wise not to create that primetime opportunity. She, on the other hand, is yet to make the sale with the American public. She has flip-flopped on a variety of issues. And by the way, the candidates did that in the vice presidential debate. We should encourage more of that because all of these candidates are flipping to the middle. And I certainly hope Harris does some more of it, and Trump should do some more of it. But she has an opportunity now to introduce herself and make the sale. That could be something that moves the needle one way or the other. But she needed to do it, and 60 Minutes is a credible venue to do it in. So we'll see how she does.
And unlike the MSNBC interview, this one will be seen by a massive amount of people compared to that.
Absolutely. Millions of people across America. And it's really a very significant both opportunity and potentially challenge for her if she makes a mistake.
Okay. There's going to be a lot of external things that will possibly derail each campaign between now and November 5th.
But they're external factors that neither candidate or neither the campaign can control. President Biden, for the most part, can't control them. And they may have a very significant effect on the campaign. For example, we've talked about foreign interference, and we've yet to see how that's fully going to play out between the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese in trying to manipulate American public opinion. But there's other things. The hurricane damage in Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida provides both an opportunity for the Biden-Harris administration to demonstrate strong responsiveness or to do like was done in Katrina to really screw things up. And people there have very little patience when they're waiting for their check or their trailer or their tent or their food or their water for government bureaucracy. So that is a challenge that could work both ways. But it also raises the issue because a lot of what was damaged was in rural Florida, in the Panhandle, in rural Georgia, in rural North Carolina. Those are Republican voting areas. So is Trump still opposed to things that assist people to vote when their polling place is underwater and destroyed? Will he support mail-in ballots because that's what you're going to need for people that are not at their normal residence because it doesn't exist anymore? What's that going to do in two states, Georgia and North Carolina, where the turnout is going to be razor thin? How will that affect it? Can people even get to the polls? So that's going to be a factor nobody had on their bingo card a couple of weeks ago. You've got some other things. The stock market is down today because oil prices are up because of the war in the Middle East. And the war in the Middle East is continuing to vex Biden and Harris. There's no easy path to it. They obviously have very little influence with what Israel does. And they've been wholly ineffective in keeping Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran from attacking Israel. They're actually doing it with weapons they purchased with money that Biden freed up for them. So that's a serious problem for the Democrats. It's still a problem in Michigan. I watched voters being interviewed there today, and it's not going to get any better.
Right.
Then you have the new revelations about Trump's legal situation, including transcripts where an aide told him Vice President Pence is physically in danger and needs to be evacuated. And his response was, so what? And I think by the time you go through the 130-some pages of those disclosures, there'll be more. Now, I think a lot of that is already baked into the vote, particularly with Republicans.
Right.
But it just continues to underscore the point about why Trump is really unqualified to serve again.
Right.
And you see, we have a new movie, The Apprentice, coming out, which will be in theaters everywhere in a couple of weeks. That is, I'm told, not complimentary to the young Donald Trump.
I didn't realize that was going to be in the theaters that soon. I have seen some clips from it. From a movie standpoint, it didn't look very good. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just seeing clips, but it didn't look like it was produced very well.
Well, people are not going to go see it to see if it's an Academy Award nominee. They're going to go see it to see how bad Trump was back in the 70s.
Right, exactly.
And I think it'll tell that story fairly well. And of course, Melania Trump this week has declared that she is all in for all abortion all the time and that there should not be any limitations on it. That's in her new video that's come out. Apparently, it's going to be in her new book, which puts her at odds with Donald Trump's position. Of course, Donald Trump's position is his third or fourth one, so it may not be the same position tomorrow. But it's beginning to exacerbate the tension that exists now between Trump and more conservative people who take abortion as their number one issue on the pro-life side, and more discomfort with Donald Trump. So a lot of those issues that we had not anticipated before are bubbling up here. They can't be controlled or managed really by the campaigns, and their impact on the election is yet to be determined.
And we will keep an eye on all of those things because that will be what's going on over the next 30 days or so. Before we close out, though, you wanted to talk a little bit about an opinion piece from Rudy Giuliani's daughter.
I did. Caroline Giuliani, Rudy's daughter, wrote a piece in the New York Times. It's been picked up in other places, where she said that her father, Rudy's association with Donald Trump has destroyed the man, destroyed his reputation, destroyed his life, destroyed his financial situation, compromised his integrity, destroyed his legacy from when he was mayor in New York in a way that it was simply just sad to read. The sad part is that the same story could have been written by the child of 100 other Trump appointees who have been used, abused, and kicked to the floor when they were no longer of use to Donald Trump. And hopefully Republicans will begin to learn that lesson as a new administration, if he's there, takes shape, or will hopefully more learn it before the election happens, because it was a truly sad tale about the impact of being in Trump's orbit on that particular family, and the impact on a man who was one time America's mayor, who had a stellar reputation and was a candidate for president himself.
Absolutely. And he's still sticking to the bit, though.
That's the only way he's going to have his bills paid, I guess, because he's in bankruptcy. And if he admits that all of what he said was a lie, all he'll do is just make it easier for him to go to jail. He was disbarred recently in both New York and the District of Columbia. And by the way, these cases are still going on. This week, today, Tina Peters, the Mesa County, Colorado registrar recorder, was sentenced to 9 years in prison because she attempted to tamper with the voting machines, and she's a Trumper, so she was tampering with them on behalf of Trump. Newsmax, the amount was undisclosed, but they settled their lawsuit with Smartmatic on the voting machines. So presumably now the amount of settlements and fines and judgments against people who have alleged voter fraud now exceeds $1 billion.
Wow. Well, you have to feel sorry for the families of these people, like Rudy's family, because they're somewhat innocent victims in all this.
They are. And it's a wake. It's like a war. It just leaves casualties on all sides that are unnecessary. It destroys families. It destroys careers. And as I've said, Republican candidates not yet born will be answering for Donald Trump.
Okay. We'll see what's on the table next week. There's nothing really scheduled for this week, right?
Sunday evening, everybody, tune in, because that will be the Harris 60 Minutes interview.
Oh.
And by this time next week, she's either going to be making a breakthrough in the polls or she's going to be making a breakdown in the polls. And a lot of it's going to depend on her performance in that interview.
Great. So we will have something to report about. We'll be able to do an episode then.
I think there'll be something to talk about.
Okay. Like us on Facebook. Give us a good review on Spotify or iTunes. And we will be back again next week for another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.